Good morning and welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. I have a very special guest here. His name is Brian Downing, and he is the high school principal at Okoboji High School in Okoboji, Iowa. Hey, good morning, Brian.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for having me. Great to see you today.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about. We took a few minutes here before the show, and we have a lot of similar stories or similar paths that have kind of crossed, and I'm going to I want to jump into that here in a little bit, but why don't you tell us real quick, Okoboji, those of us in Iowa or southern Minnesota, eastern Nebraska, like that's a huge tourist spot. We love going to your to your area. So tell us about Okoboji, tell us about your job, maybe where you've been, and then let's come back at the very end and talk about your connection to the school district I work in. So
Yeah,
Brian,
sure.
take it from there.
Well, my history in the Okoboji area goes back to the beginning. I was actually born and raised right here in the area and grew up here. Didn't realize what a unique area it was until I moved out of it and realized all the things that I had access to as a kid because of the tourism here in Okoboji that other similar small towns did not. But I've been here as the high school principal here in Okoboji. This will be on my 11th year. We have 4 kids that are all in the system. First one in high school is I have a sophomore in high school. I'm going to have an 8th grader, a 6th grader, and a 4th grader. So we're on the 2-year plan. My wife is a mental health therapist who owns her own practice here in town. And so we're very, very connected with the community. We have roots that go pretty deep, family here, a lot of connections, and very much connected with our community here in Okoboji.
So high school principal there since 2010, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. And so before that, we were kind of talking about you had to stop there in Lisbon, which is outside, just to the east of Cedar Rapids. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I was at Lisbon that was my first principalship from 2006 to 2010. I started as the high school principal there, and then also added some middle school duties toward the end as well. And I was there for 4 years, an amazing place. It's very intertwined with the communities of Lisbon and Mount Vernon. Still have a lot of great connections there, and learned a lot from, I worked for my first 2 superintendents there. I've worked for 5 superintendents, learned something from each of them, and also learned a lot from my counterpart at the elementary there, Roger Teeling, who unfortunately passed way too young earlier this year, but have really gained a lot of insight and knowledge from him as well.
And so about maybe 3 months ago, you reached out to me on Twitter and you mentioned, hey, and I don't know if we were following each other on Twitter then or not. I think we were, but you mentioned, hey, I did my teaching where I'm at right now, which is at South Tama County, Tama, Toledo, Iowa. So
Yes.
tell me, that's such a small world. And before the show, we were kind of talking about some of your experiences and the people but just tell me about, and for those of you, I told Brian before we started, I try to keep this as universal and as big picture as possible, but sometimes I love to dig into the details, the local details. So if you are somebody from outside the state, which a lot of you are, you can feel free to fast forward if you want for a few minutes. But I want to hear from Brian. I want to hear just tell me, take a few minutes about your South Tama County days, because
Oh, yeah.
the local listeners might enjoy hearing this.
I absolutely, a part of my heart will always be in Tama, Toledo. I did not know anything about South Tama until a job came up on Teach Iowa. Went and interviewed with Steve Burr, and was lucky enough to get the position. And as a 22-year-old, maybe barely 23-year-old, walking into my first position, I had no idea what to expect. I'll never forget, it was a block schedule, so I had 3 90-minute periods to prepare each day. Really very much just trying to stay one day ahead of the kids. I'll never forget, people always ask me, what year did you start teaching? And for me, it's always going to be very easy to remember because it was 2001. I'd been teaching for about 2 weeks when the September 11th attacks happened, and being a social studies teacher, that was quite a unique experience. I had the privilege of being formally mentored by the incomparable Neil Russell, who who is a local legend in the South Tama area, taught many generations of social studies. And then maybe a little more informally mentored by the equally incomparable Seth Cook, who is very much still there, and we do stay in touch. I learned a lot from Seth, both in teaching and in his leadership. Even though Seth wasn't in an administrative position, he was very much a leader among the staff, and that was very influential on me. And had the opportunity to work for Steve Burr. And Steve, I've worked for a lot of different principals and superintendents, and I've tried to learn something from each of them. And from Steve, I learned calm in the storm, because Steve I never saw him lose his cool. I never saw him raise his voice. I never saw him sweat. And there was a lot at South Tama is a very unique school. As you know, it's full of opportunity and wonderful people. It's full of diversity that most students in Iowa never get to experience. And it was clear that it took a special person to be able to focus all of that. And watching Steve for 5 years was like watching a master class in that. So coached track and girls track and cross country at South Tama. Loved that. Still have some great connections with those kids. I'm friends with them on Facebook, and of course now they're married and have kids of their own, and it's amazing how time flies. But my wife started her career in Tama as well, worked for Mid-Iowa Community Action, and it was just a great season of our life, and carry a lot of fond memories from that place.
Oh gosh, that's awesome. I'm sitting here in my office looking across the where you made your mark.
Looking across Harding Street.
Right across Harding Street.
Yep.
Yep. The high school still stands over there. It's been added on to a little bit since.
Yes.
But that's a cool story, and I'm glad, Seth, if you're listening, we're gonna hopefully you like those words of that shout out that you got there, and yep, Seth continues as an instructional coach. He's definitely a leader in our district, and
Absolutely.
somebody that's been relied upon here these last few years of myself coming in, some new leadership in the district. He's definitely been somebody we've look to help push us forward. So
absolutely.
So thanks for sharing that. Such a small world. Now let's focus. Okay. The first question I always ask is the one restaurant you recommend in your area. And again, I'm going to go back to this. I cannot understate to the rest of the listeners out there who are not from this area. Okoboji is I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but it's probably, outside of Des Moines, it's probably the one spot that people, especially in the summer with the beautiful lake up there, people go up there all the time from all over the state. So I know you're in the public eye, so this is a tough question. But what is one restaurant, if somebody's coming up there and they're looking for some place to go, where would you encourage they
go? There's a lot of great options. Like you said, we are a tourist area. To give you an idea on some numbers, we have about 17,000 people that live in Dickinson County year round, and that comprises about 4 or 5 towns. Estimates on a 4th of July, a normal 4th of July, can be upwards of 150,000 people in the area. And so it can balloon to 10 times its normal size. So we have a lot of restaurant options. People love eating Mexican food when they're on vacation. So there's so many good Mexican restaurants up here, ranging from fairly, traditional to very much not. But I would say if you're in the mood for really good food, we have a restaurant called Beach Club, which is in a hotel that was just recently built, but is in the style of an older vintage hotel called the Inn. And the Beach Club has just amazing dishes that you would expect to only get in a large town. And then if you want pizza, there's a lot of pizza up here too. We have a place called the Portside Pizza Pub that does kind of a New York style pizza right on Broadway. Broadway is kind of the main strip through Arnold's Park, the most popular part of our area. And you can't miss with either one of those. That's where I'd send you.
Awesome. As always, I'm behind the scenes looking at menus here. The Beach Club, and I'm at Facebook. I'm probably not going to be quick enough here. Well, no, you're right. No, and really nice. Some tacos, salads, some flatbreads. It looks like
really good flatbreads.
Oh man.
Great salads. Kind of upscale, but still laid back.
Sure.
Prices aren't too bad. But yeah, it's my new favorite place. It opened a couple years ago, and we find
Awesome.
ourselves there a lot.
So, we talked about child or connections throughout the years, and
Mhm.
my family, I grew up in Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and my mom would take us to Okoboji. I think all 3 or 4, 4 years of middle school ish, fifth through ninth,
Sure.
we went up there and stayed at good old Fillenworth.
Oh, Fillenworth, yes. It's Fillenworth is the last of its kind up here. It reminds me of the Dirty Dancing uh, resort. Very
Sure.
much set in that old style. The cabins, the pool, the
Sure.
big dock. Yeah, and it's still very very much going right next to the middle school that we're leaving.
Oh
We built a new
wow.
middle school, but yeah, generations of kids have gone to school right next to Fillenworth and
Oh
work
my,
there in the summer.
that's right. No, I remember we would always, when we pull into Fillenworth, there'd always be a school there. And I think
Yep.
my siblings would always say, "Oh my gosh, it'd be so cool to go here."
Yeah,
Like,
it
yeah.
was a great location.
Okay, well, hey, let's dig in. Thank you for sharing those couple
Yeah.
places again. For those people visiting Okoboji, and like you mentioned, there's probably quite a few places to go. But I appreciate you bringing up those couple places there for the pizza and for the other food. So, okay, so next question is, what is the best $50 purchase you've made in the last 6 months?
Boy, I had to rack my brain on this one. I actually I went back in my Amazon cart and I looked at my
Okay,
orders and
good
looked at
thinking.
things that I purchased. Yeah. And it's going to sound funny, but I would say it wasn't $50, but it was under 50. I figured that would count.
Yeah, it does.
Um, a $7 dryer element thermostat for an LG dryer. And the reason I would say it's the best purchase I've made is because early on in our quarantine, our dryer, which is probably 8 years old, stopped working, wasn't blowing hot. And I am no dryer fixer. I called around to the repair places in the area. Most of them were only servicing things that they had sold. They were limiting their service window because of coronavirus. And I did not want to have to buy a new dryer. And my father is very mechanical, so I kind of got a hold of him, and he helped me find videos online that teach you how to fix your own dryer. And I looked up on Amazon, found the part. It was $7. Hauled the dryer into the garage for a few days. Had a completely disassembled dryer. It's amazing seeing a dryer completely taken apart, and it works. We put it in, and it's been working for 2 or 3 months now. And it's funny because now it's like whenever I dry a load of clothes, I kind of get a little satisfaction knowing that me, who's not the most mechanical person in the world, was able to fix it using, frankly, some of the same learning tools and ways of discovering how to do things that we encourage our kids to use. So I would have to say that. My second choice would have been my $15 Cubs neck gaiter. Getting ready for school, I've gotten several masks and things like that we'll need. And I'm a huge Cubs fan, and we just went out to Colorado on a little social distance trip, and it was neat to have the Cubs gaiter on and everybody, go Cubs and or
Sure,
Cardinal
sure.
fans making fun of it or whatever. It's just good natured. So I would say those are my two best.
No, those are good. Those are good. I can only imagine the fear in your wife with your 4 kids and the 6 of you in the house, and of not having a dryer for an extended period
Yeah,
of time during coronavirus.
it doesn't work. And it was a great analogy for our time because as I said, my father is an engineer by trade. He is very mechanical, and throughout my life, I've had the luxury of being able to call him and say, help. And this was early on in the coronavirus quarantine. We really weren't even seeing our parents at that time. And so it kind of forced me to, I got to tackle this on my own, it's a good thing. And it's a good reminder for me to put kids in that situation too.
Sure, sure. Okay, moving on here, Brian. What is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
This is a tough one too. I should read more. Everybody probably says that. When I have time, I find myself, I'm very active and moving. And so I'm listening to some books, which I'd like to do more of. I'm very, very into podcasts. I would say it's cliche, but the book that has impacted me the most certainly is the Bible. My faith is very important to me. It has been since I was young. It has definitely shaped my life. But outside of that, I think two of the books that have gripped me the most have been those that I read from Malcolm Gladwell. I very much enjoy Gladwell. I enjoy his deep dives. I love podcasts like Stuff You Should Know and his revisionist history. Outliers and The Tipping Point were both books that were very eye-opening to me, and ones that I find myself referencing more than I would think.
Sure, sure. Talk about, you mentioned podcasts too. And you mentioned one or two. I'm always curious to find new podcasts. What are the podcasts you listen to? Are they, and I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, quite honestly. Yeah. But sports or professional or self-growth, what podcasts do you usually check out?
Yeah, my favorites, the ones I listen to the most are Stuff You Should Know, which is a production of How Stuff Works. And it is just deep dives into every kind of subject you could imagine. From like the two that gripped me the most recently were the New York City grid system, talking for an hour about how the grid structure of New York City was set up in Central Park. They've done deep dives into historical, CIA or FBI missions. Political things. It's a trivia base. It's just you just get really immersed into it. One time they did an episode on ballpoint pens, and it just sounds like the driest thing in the world. But gosh, I was just obsessed with it. So that's a big one. I really enjoyed revisionist history from Malcolm Gladwell along the same lines. There's a show. My wife is a mental health therapist, and there's a show that we had found that was kind of more in her realm called Invisibilia. Very much about our thoughts and emotions and feelings and how they drive us. I'm a sociology major originally, way back in another life. In undergrad, I was a social major, and so that really grips me as well. And then for my escapism, I love a good true crime podcast. Whether it be Crime Junkie or whatever it might be along those lines. I love those as well.
Now, so you're speaking my language here, because I have not checked any of those that you talked about. I guess the true crime, when Serial a few years ago?
Yep.
That was big. I got into that a little bit, but I always tell, a lot of people say, hey, I don't listen to podcasts. Like, when do you typically do that? Is there set times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing work around the house, doing dishes or vacuuming or whatever, I always have my AirPods in my ears, and it's pretty much always a podcast. When I'm mowing the lawn, I'll do that. When I'm driving, we just drove back from Colorado, and I downloaded a number of podcasts. Another one that's been a big favorite lately is both The Office Ladies and The Office, which is Brian Baumgartner, who played Kevin on The Office. I'm obsessed with The Office. The Office is my all-time favorite show. Anyone that knows me will tell you that. So it stimulates my brain in a way that music doesn't. I love music. A big fan of music. I listen to Spotify all the time as well. But I find that I can listen to podcasts for 5 minutes while I'm doing something, and then an hour later, when I have another 10 minutes, I can come back to it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree. I was doing some laundry yesterday. That's one of my, we don't have kids, but we've got split duties, and and laundry is actually one of mine, and I don't mind, because every time I'm getting the laundry fired up, or putting away laundry or putting away the laundry, I got something going on.
Yes, I do the same thing.
Something in the background. And I've been trying, people who are kind of new to podcasts, I'm like, it's easy. You could, you're brushing your teeth when you're doing the dishes, when you're putting away laundry, when you're doing yard work. So I appreciate you kind of sharing those, and for some other podcast ideas out there for the listeners. So thank you. Okay. Hey, I am excited about this one, because you seem like a culture guy.
Yeah.
And I want to know, what's your best culture hack? So why
I
don't you give me that? And
yeah.
if you don't bring up the videos, I'm going to bring them up. So
Oh no, somehow I knew that would come up. I would say as far as when I read that question, I think being intentional, scheduling your priorities, because one of the things that I learned very quickly about the position, especially a position I think of the principalship, is it can swallow up hours, days, and even weeks if you're not intentional. And so, if you want to get into classrooms, if you want to be visible to students and cultivate relationships, you have to be intentional about it. It's funny. I've joked with people. I'm a little like Pavlov's dogs when the bell rings. When I hear that passing bell ring, it seems without even thinking of it, whatever I'm doing, if I happen to be in my office, I'm up and out in the hallway, because that's my time. I always see passing time and lunchtime and before and after school. Those are my class times. And so I'm very intentional about getting out in the hallways and being present with kids during the times that I can. And that has to be scheduled. And I've done that well as far as being in classrooms. And there's been seasons of my career where I haven't, and I always come back to the times when I'm not doing the things that I want to do. It's because I'm not scheduling them, and that has a pretty quick impact. I'll be like, yeah, I'm just kind of in a rut, and I'll look and say, oh yeah, I'm spending a lot of time sitting in my office, and sometimes that's necessary. We all understand that, but scheduling the priorities, and then in terms, it kind of relates to bring it around to what led to things like the video. I had several different types of principals that I've worked with or for or had as a student. And I grew up in the 80s with um, the principals on the John Hughes movies, fighting with John Bender. 2 weeks, I got you for 2 weeks, 2 months. You mess with the bull, you get the horns. And I knew that I had no interest in being that, and that I did not believe one needed to be that. And I've always believed strongly that you can lead with a sense of humility and compassion and humor. And I don't want to have to lose those things. And I think those have, for the most part, helped ingratiate me with those that I work with and those that I serve. And even in difficult moments, I've always said we can confront issues, we can deal with confrontations without being confrontational. And I think that's all wrapped up in that. And you mentioned the video that kind of went a little farther than I thought it would early on in the school closure. I actually saw a good friend of mine who you've interviewed before, Jason Klein. Jason and I, interestingly enough, have never met in person. We've never been in the same place at the same time that I know of, but we know each other well. We probably interact every other day at least, either on Facebook Messenger or Twitter. And Jason had done a real short snippet of sitting in the cafeteria by himself, being a lonely principal. And I thought, that's funny. I think there's some more songs that we could do. And my daughters helped me figure out some other songs. And I just went in with my phone and filmed it, threw it together in about 5 minutes. And it just wanted to remind kids that we miss them, and that we're still going to be here. We're still here for them. And I think, obviously, I think it had an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got it kind of going behind here. I got it on mute in the background. So you use TikTok, which again, that's pretty impressive. What was the thought behind using TikTok there? Any daughter's influence, or
a little bit? Yeah. One of my daughters had, obviously been on TikTok and kind of knew how it worked. I've always felt that you have to, there's different social media platforms depending on what audience you're trying to reach. If I have a message that I want to get to our parents, I put it on Facebook. If I have a message I want to get to our students, I put it on Instagram. And there's no more probably student-driven world right now than TikTok. And so I used TikTok, got a few pointers from my daughter on how to do it. Didn't do a whole lot of fancy editing, but it came together all right. And then I actually posted it on our school Facebook page. That's where it got the most traction. That's where it kind of went the widest, was on my personal and our school Facebook pages.
Okay. Any idea how many? So maybe we should give some context. You created a video that's kind of a compilation of all of these songs where you are alone.
Yes. Mr.
Right.
Lonely, All by Myself. Yeah, songs like that.
And you're kind of going throughout the building in different,
Hmm.
and the cafeteria and the library and the auditorium and the hallway, and just kind of
Yes.
lip syncing those.
Yes, lip syncing. Thankfully, not singing. It's not my voice. You wouldn't want that.
So, do you have any idea? I'm like your Twitter. Do you have any idea how many times it's been viewed?
Well, the most views were on Facebook, and I think that's probably somewhere around 1.25 million.
Oh my
Um,
gosh!
I think between YouTube and Twitter, it probably had another few 100,000. So I'd say a
Oh,
1.5 million views or so.
wow, that is.
I got a lot of messages from people. Hey, somebody in my friend in Texas saw it, or it was bigger than I thought it would be. That's for sure.
Well, that's awesome. Well, for anybody who's at home, like, okay, just a quick Google search of Brian Downing Principal, Brian Downing TikTok, you'll find it there, and you'll get a chance to view it. So we'll give you a few more views there. We'll
There
try
you
to get
go.
started up. We'll try to get it started up again.
Get it up again. There you go.
But that's really cool. Well, I think there's a lot to, and a few of our guests have talked about. Just like I love how you phrased that, like those 1980s principles. I've written about
Yes.
that too. Like there is a lot of growing up, and I was maybe a few years behind you, but growing up, there was this perception in pop culture that principals and teachers were these
Yeah.
mean, aloof, not student friendly. I grew up with
Yeah.
Mr. Beldings, who I grew up with. Now,
Mr. Belding. Yes.
he kind of went both ways.
He was pretty cool.
He was pretty cool. He wasn't really, he'd do some questionable decisions at times,
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah.
So he wasn't too bad, but I just watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh yes.
In the theater here a couple weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you just think of the teacher, and I can't remember his real name, but the teacher,
Oh yeah.
monotone, who just
Bueller. Yes.
Yes.
Ben Stein. Yes.
Ben Stein. That's kind of what we grew up with. For us,
Yeah.
like this is how teachers are supposed to be. This is how principals are supposed to be. And
it's amazing that I became a principal. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is my favorite movie. I actually have a sticker on the backside of my computer here that says "Save Ferris." My goal was to be the opposite of Ed Rooney.
Yes, Ed Rooney. That's even a better example for us. Is that mean principal who sits in the office, does nothing but discipline.
9 times.
Yeah.
9 times.
Yeah. So if you're a younger listener and you want to see exactly,
go watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Do it because it transcends age.
And you want to do exactly the opposite of what a principal
Edward R. Rooney
or a teacher should do, that is the
That's
movie.
your movie.
Okay, Brian.
Exactly.
What is one professional practice you utilize that you would recommend to others?
Yeah, I would say the one I use that's had the most impact is immediate observation feedback. And we years ago, one of the first years I was here, my team and I created a Google Doc or Google Forms system, and we use a script that is easily downloadable. That basically, I have a form that I use to take some notes. Oftentimes, it's as simple as I saw, I thought, I wondered. Very open-ended, very conversational. I'm taking some notes as I'm observing, whether it's for a formal observation or whether I'm just coming through. And I hit submit as soon as I leave. It immediately creates a document and emails it to the teacher. So they have some immediate feedback, and it gives them an avenue to respond, or just gives them some food for thought. And that's been really powerful. We actually put that system years ago up on YouTube and had a number of people that contacted us about it, learning about it, because it's free. It's very easy to do. And teachers really have appreciated that. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from that. So I would say that professional practice, providing immediate feedback, has been a powerful one.
Now, I guess I didn't get into this before the show, so I'm curious. What is your leadership structure in your building? Do you have an assistant principal?
I do not. I've never have. There was a time where we had a dean of students that was shared from the middle school and high school, but we have not had that for some time. We have a full-time teaching learning coordinator. instructional coach. I have a full-time activities and student services director that, of course, works throughout the district, but is based primarily out of the high school. But in my building, we don't have an assistant principal.
So in terms of that feedback to teachers, is it
Mhm.
just on you then? Is it?
No,
Or
that is where our teaching learning coordinators really do a lot. They probably do more than I do now. When I started here, of course, the TLC system, teacher leadership compensation system, didn't exist in Iowa. We didn't have those positions. So I was very much the lead coach. And so as the teacher leadership system has evolved, I would say that onus has shifted more toward them. So Brad Peter is our teaching and learning coordinator at the high school. He is probably doing more of that than I am, but he's using those same systems that we had put in place.
okay, that's always, and we always preach that it's good to have, when you're giving feedback to teachers, multiple eyes, to
Mm-hmm.
multiple perspectives. And it's always interesting to hear how different districts are able to utilize those teacher leaders.
Yeah, everybody's got their own way.
Yeah. But I would have to think when it's just, when it's just you as the one admin, it's good to have multiple perspectives. And I feel like
Definitely.
you get in rooms. It sounds like you value getting into rooms, and so you get a chance to see many different. You're not just getting one or two glimpses. You're seeing several
Yeah.
different observations.
Yeah, we really try to, if nothing else, just to normalize the idea that I'm in the room. The first few times an administrator goes into a room, that's going to be what's noticed. And if I find that I'm walking into a room and no one's really noticing, then that tells me I'm getting in there enough, because it's becoming routine.
Sure,
It's
sure.
like the telephone poles you drive past, you don't notice them because you always see them.
Good point. Good point. Um, in the last 5 years, what new habit has most improved your life?
Um, Habits around self-care. When early on in my principalship, as I think a lot of people do, I kind of neglected those things. I had been a runner throughout my life, and I wasn't running. My wife and I kind of got back. Most of the good self-care and self-improvement habits that I've taken on have been credited to her. She's a lot better at that than I am. And I'll see her doing something for a while, and then I'll see the benefits, and I'll be like, I should do that, because I'm a little more slow on the uptake than she is. But that's one. And then more recently, along those same lines, though, is just meditation and trying to focus on mindfulness. I have a tendency, I'm a starter. If you could see me sitting here right now, my knee is probably bouncing up and down. I'm kind of a ball of energy, and that can translate into being scattered sometimes, and making it difficult to focus. And especially this year, with all of the unique demands and situations that we have facing us, I know that I need to focus, and I need to be able to kind of push back against that scatteredness. And so I've been doing some meditation through an app on the phone called Calm. Got a great 30-day one that I'm on day 5, I think now, just kind of getting started. So it's a new habit, but I can already tell that it's paying dividends.
So you just hit on two topics that I could spend all day talking about:
Yeah,
self-care and mindfulness. So let's take just a couple more minutes.
sure.
Because when I listen to podcasts or read, a lot of my stuff, I've been getting more and more into self-care, mindfulness, meditation, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Self-care, what's your routine, or what you mentioned? You used to be a runner. Are you getting back into running? Are you doing
Yeah.
something else, or?
Yeah. I pretty regular runner now, have been for the last few years, not nearly as fast as I used to be, and it hurts more. But I'm doing it. My wife and I are both morning runners. So even though it means we have to get up earlier, it starts my day off better. One part of self-care for me is I can't roll out of bed and go to school. I have to kind of have some warm-up time. And so I know that even though it means I'm not getting as much sleep, maybe I have to get up a little earlier so I can run. Or if I don't run, maybe that morning there's something else I'm going to do here at home. I don't like to leave the house frazzled. And with 4 kids, and 2 full-time jobs between my wife and I, it can be that way. organization is a part of my self-care. We have a million different schedules, and one of the life hacks that's been great for me is we use a shared Google Calendar, as many I'm sure do. My older two daughters now put things into that calendar as well. But we, like many families, had the old wall calendar, the old paper wall calendar that hung on the wall, and I was frustrated because it wasn't updated in real time. I'd put something in the Google Calendar, and obviously it wasn't on the paper calendar. So a few years ago, we did a project where we actually mounted a monitor on the wall where the wall calendar goes. And I have that hooked up through a Google Chromecast to a computer. So it's got a wall calendar that's always updated. So the kids, even if they don't have Google Calendar yet, they can walk up to it and look at it and see what we have going. And just knowing that we are organized, I'm one of those people, if I have it written down somewhere or in a Google Calendar, then I can let it go out of my brain. And I can only hold on to so many things at once. And so that's the big one. Those are probably some of the biggest parts of self-care for me. I like to have a little bit of downtime, try to structure my day to allow that. I'm a person of routine. So if I can, great job to go into, high school principal, if somebody loves routine, because there's no 2 days that are alike. But the more I can kind of structure that, the better for me.
And you are putting me right into the next question, but I'm going to hold off for just a second there. Mindfulness. I just wrote an article a couple days ago about this, because I think my perception is that I'm going to use this, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but a lot of people, you mentioned the Bible earlier. I don't want to go too deep.
Sure.
A lot of people would say that meditation is anti-religious or maybe against whatever, Christian belief or something.
Right.
So, so to just tell me about, I guess, talk about that, and then tell me, what is mindfulness in your words? What is mindfulness or meditation? Because there's just, I think, I'm getting into it a little bit more. When I think of it, I think of somebody cross-legged with all these weird sounds and incense, and that's not what it is. So
no.
Tell me a little bit your thoughts on a couple of those ideas.
Yeah, I probably grew up thinking that too. That any kind of meditation meant, that you were cross-legged in the middle of a big pillow and trying to float. But that has not been my experience at all. As I've said, I've come through. I've seen the power that mindfulness has had for my wife, both for her and for her clients. And I'm pretty much. What I did is I hitched my wagon. I outkicked my coverage. I hitched my wagon to a much better horse than and I've just been following along. And I'm a little slower on it, but it gets me to some amazing places. And so I think that what the power I've seen in meditation is just blocking everything out, taking 10 minutes. Literally, the meditations that I do are 10 minutes, and putting all of the stress and the competing demands and the noise that our world makes ubiquitous, and just choosing to put it away for 10 minutes and learning how, even when you're not in a meditative process, those things you're learning, like a word that I've just learned within the last few weeks, equanimity, which is basically the ability to kind of let things come and go, and to not exactly stoicism, not, I've learned about that too, but being calm in the storm, not being a victim of your circumstances, but allowing things to take place, and you're being okay. And I think for our day and time right now, that's a huge, powerful lesson. And I think it marries very well with a deep and abiding faith, without going too far into it. I believe that we're here for a purpose. I believe that I have a purpose. I believe in a greater good. And I believe that if I'm not taking the time to focus and keep my priorities straight and make sure that where I'm going is where I want to go, then I'm not fulfilling that purpose.
So I'm pulling your trick here. I'm looking up a book real quick, and I don't know if I'm going to get there in time. And again, I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but I don't mind. So I've been reading. I've read a lot of meditation books. I'm not great, not a lot, a handful, and I've listened to a handful of podcasts. there's one book out there, and I'm gonna throw you a book title here. It's called Christian Meditation.
Okay.
Experiencing the Presence of God.
Uh-huh.
And I'm about halfway through, but it does a great job of explaining why meditation does merge well, like you mentioned, with the
Mm-hmm.
Christian faith. So again, I don't
Yeah.
want to go too I don't want to go too far down that path, but
Yeah. I appreciate that.
I searched long and hard for a book that would kind of tell me that what I was doing was okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was one that I just picked up off Amazon that kind of, and again, I'm only halfway through, so I can't speak to, but it does, it made me feel better that I wasn't
Mhm.
doing something wrong. You know what
Right. Yeah.
I'm saying?
Well, and for those that are interested in these kind of things and getting started but would have no idea where to start, I would suggest there's an app for iOS, and I'm sure it's on Android as well, called Calm. And basically, you can then subscribe to a whole bunch of different things. But the one I've been going through is a series called How to Meditate. It's very beginner, don't have to, you're not going to be sitting cross-legged on a pillow.
Sure.
It's a guy named Jeff Warren, and he's got a great story, and it's 10 minutes a day, and it really it's a 30-day program, and I've really been impressed with it. So I would
You
put a
know,
plug in for it.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's what I love about this podcast. I want to give people actual things that they can go and do. Like
Mm-hmm.
they can go to their phone and download it and try it out. Now you mentioned
Yeah.
a 30-day free trial. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. My
Or-
wife actually already had
Okay.
a account with Calm.
Okay. Sure.
It's a little bit like Audible, where you pay a certain amount, I think, to have a
Sure.
membership, and then you can access whatever you want.
Sure. Yep. I've definitely heard of Calm. The one my buddy, one of our earlier podcast guests, Jason, oh gosh, I was going to say Potter. I'm forgetting Jason Wester
Mm-hmm.
there at Tipton, superintendent over there. He got me hooked on Headspace, which is another, it's another app. It's another app.
Yeah.
You can get some free sessions, and then
Yeah.
you're right. Same idea. Pay for,
Yeah.
a $60 for the year.
Yep.
Break that down per month. It's not too bad, but
Not bad.
again, I warned you. I warned the listeners. I could talk about this all day because it's interesting.
Yes.
Talking to other educational leaders who are like, our days are crazy. I mean, as a high school principal, there's always something. It's not like there's very few jobs that, like you mentioned, it's something different every day. There's always something that needs to be done. Just creating those 10 minutes of solitude can really help you out. So again, thank you so much for going down that with me for a minute. Let's go back to daily routine. So you kind of mentioned your routine. Maybe we've already talked about it. You mentioned the running in the morning. You mentioned some of the, the 10 minutes or so you're trying to get, some of the quiet time, but what else, anything else you want to share in terms of your routine?
No, I mean, I try to get to school on a consistent time. I usually get to school about 7:30 in the morning. I used to be earlier, but with 4 kids, there's just some things that have to be done at home before I can go. I like to, do a quick email check in the morning, see what came in overnight. I've tried to, when I was first principal, I had the email notifications on my smartphone, and I figured out real quick that needed to go away. So I do try to put email into time boxes, morning, midday, before I go home, maybe once at night. But then I'm out in the hallways. That before school time is critical for relationship building. It's also, frankly, critical for building supervision. There's few times in a day where you have more kids unsupervised than before school, because your teachers, for the most part, they're hurrying, they're trying to get ready, they're getting their last minute copies, they're making sure that link works on their presentation. And so it's a great time for me to be in the hallways and be seen. I read the announcements pretty much every morning, which is like so old school. I have felt like I should have like a little bell set, like on Grease. But what's funny is it's amazing how the kids connect to that. If I'm gone a couple of days or don't read the announcements for some reason, I'll have kids ask me. They'll wonder where I am. In fact, when I was shared for the last couple of years between the middle school and high school, we actually had a phone system that allowed me to read the announcements. I was at the middle school, but I'd read them at the high school, and I loved it because kids still thought I was there. So that's a little thing that I think connects, and I do think it impacts culture. It gives them some consistency. Getting in the hallways between every passing period, I try to do as many lunch shifts as I can. I don't stay late. I try to come home, even if I have to go back. I'd rather come home and be home for a couple hours and then go back for the ball game or for the meeting, because that way I have 4 kids and we do have a lot here, and I don't want them to miss out. So, and I'm a pretty early to bed. If I see 10:30, it's a surprise. We're usually winding down by about 9:45, and maybe I'll watch a half an episode of The Office before I fall asleep, and then it's back at it the next day, because we're usually up. If we're running, we're up by 5 to get out and run before everything gets going. So.
Now, do you and your wife run together, or you go on shifts? Or?
Yeah, mostly we run together. Our kids are old enough now where we don't have to worry about them being home alone. So we'll usually run together.
Sure. And just a couple other thoughts. You mentioned, and I'm the same way as you with your email. Okay, let me back up. I have tried to do the set time blocks for email responses. I've gotten worse. I need to go back to that.
Yeah, it goes up and down.
But in terms of the notifications, I preach that to our not preach. I suggest that to our admin team about, I do not mind if you take email notifications off your phone.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit longer to realize than you mentioned. You kind of figured it out right away. Like, it took me until about 3 or 4 years ago to say, okay, my mind has to get away from these messages for just a while, and the emails can wait.
Yep.
So that's just something that, and when I share that with other admins, to me and you, it's kind of like, yeah, that's how we operate. Like, a lot of people are surprised. Oh, you can, and I don't know if that's my anxiety, if that's my, just like you're always anxious, always, my mind's always going somewhere. But I guess for the listeners out there, there's two. Me and you both agree that the notifications need to can really be a help. Getting rid of those can really be a help with, as long as you still do a good job of getting back, set those times up and getting back to people too. So,
and I think I try to be clear to people, especially with my staff. If it's something you need an answer right now, you need to call me. If you need an answer within an hour, then text me. If you need an answer within a day, then email me. Sure. And so no one ever emails 911. So I figure if that's the standard we go by, I don't have to get back to this question about next spring's play schedule right now. It can wait.
Sure. Go back to that rule of thumb one more time. You rattled it off. I've heard Dan Butler. I know he's pretty well known for that. He shared.
Sure.
I've kind of modeled mine after him a little bit, but share that rule of thumb again, because that's so good.
Yeah, I always say if you need me immediately, if you need an answer right now, call me. If you need it within an hour, text me. If you need it within a day, then email me.
So there's so many things I'm like, that's me. I agree. The texting, some people are, I'm going to just air quotes here, old school about that.
Yeah.
I don't want my staff texting me. I don't want people. What do you say to that? Because clearly
I prefer, I must be just on the young enough side where I prefer texting to talking on the phone, to be honest with you. Especially now there's voice to text. I can send a nice long text. And what I like about texting is there's just enough asynchronicity that it gives margin for thought. When I call someone and ask them a question, they are kind of on the spot, or when they call me and ask me. And sometimes that has to happen. Sometimes you absolutely need immediate real-time feedback. But if I want you to have even 5 minutes of space to think and respond, then I think texting can be a nice alternative.
Sure. Yeah. And gosh, this is so good. I think the same way about email sometimes too. I've written about this. My secretary will be 10 feet away. And it took her a while to get used to it, but I will write her an email instead of interrupting her work.
Yeah.
Or I want to honor the things that you were doing. So I'm going to send you an email and you get back to it when you can, instead of me walking up to you. And that's a different way of thinking. But that way, and there's the paper trail if something were to
Mhm.
with the
Yeah.
texting or with the emailing. So
The nice thing with those asynchronous things like email is I can communicate when it's on my mind and I have the ability to do it, and then you can deal with it when it's convenient for you. And as long as we both have a common understanding of how that will work for the right communications. Now, I'm a firm believer in the whole 3 email rule about there's some things that just don't work with email. They need to be face to face, the contentious issues, things like that. But
sure.
as in the right context for a good portion of our communication that is fairly routine and mundane, email is a great way to do it without, like you said, interrupting someone's thought process.
What's the 3 email rule?
If it takes more than 3 emails, I email you, you reply, and I reply back. Anything beyond that, it's probably time to find a different venue.
And
It's probably time to have a phone call or to just walk down the hall and talk, or at least use that email to arrange a time to do that.
huh. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that term before, but I'm gonna keep that in mind.
It's good. I wouldn't say I'm following it 100%. And there's times where it's like maybe we're going back and forth about trying to figure out when we can meet or something like that. But if you're discussing something where there's a difference of opinion and it's taking more than 3 emails, it's probably time to just talk.
Sure. Gosh, man, you're dropping all kinds of knowledge on this.
I
This is
just listen to smart people.
Okay, we got 2 more questions left. We're
Okay.
at perfect timing, about 8 minutes left here.
Awesome.
What is one commonly held belief in education you disagree with?
That's a tough one. That really is, because I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I don't like saying I think that's wrong. And I would say one thing that I think we can overemphasize, if we're not careful, is at the high school level, college and career readiness. I think it's important. I absolutely think, and I think we weren't doing enough of it when I was in school. Our kids are coming out with a much clearer idea of what they want to do next. We can overdo it, and sometimes it can put pressure on kids, because if I'm a junior or senior and I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life, and it seems like I'm supposed to, that can cause a disconnect that I think can cause stress. It's similar to, I think one of the things that we used to do with great intentions was, and I hope we don't do anymore, is tell kids when they're having trouble, when they're having a difficult time, saying, "Oh, teenage years are the best years of your life. I wish I could go back." What a terrible thing to say to a kid who's in a bad place. Because what that says to that kid is, this is as good as it gets. It's only going to be worse. And I think that same kind of pressure is applied when we we don't make sure kids understand it's okay if you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life. We're going to spend time learning about what you're good at and what you like, and sharing with you the a million different things you could do that we weren't doing 30 years ago. That's great. We need to do that. But I think it needs to go hand in hand with it's okay. Not everybody has it all figured out, because kids look around and they think everybody else has it all figured out and knows exactly what college they're going to and exactly what career line they're going to. And they feel like they're not there. That can cause some dissonance in them. So it's not that I don't think we should push college and career readiness. I think it's important, but I think we need to make sure that we're doing it holistically.
Gosh, you keep hitting on all these ideas that Ben Johnson, who's the assistant soup up in Bismarck, North Dakota, was a guest
Okay.
3 or 4 episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, a lot of times people will say that the high school is the best 4 years of your life. And he says, if we're saying that, we're doing something wrong.
Exactly. I tell our freshmen during orientation every year, I tell them, people, what's the point of high school? And one of the things, the best 4 years of your life, I said, if this is the best 4 years of your life, that's a failure. We should be setting you up to make the next phase of your life the best phase of your life. I completely agree with that sentiment.
That was good stuff. All right, man. Hey, you've been a teacher in South Tama, a principal at Lisbon, a principal at Okoboji. You probably have had quite a few goosebump moments. But what's the top? What's the moment that sticks with you the most, that kind of just gives you the chills when you think about it?
Sure. The single moment that I'll never forget, and it takes a little bit to explain. I had my first year at South Tama, my very first class, I had a seating arrangement figured out. Literally my first class as a teacher. And I told the kids where to sit. And I had this one young man, and I won't say his name because he's probably still in the Tama area, but I told him, you're going to sit here. Well, he didn't like something about the kid that he was supposed to sit next to. And he refused. I'm not sitting there. I've been a teacher for 5 minutes. I'm not sitting there. Absolutely refused. I said, okay, well then, you know what? The only thing I knew how to do at that time, go to the office. As he walks out of the room, he hits my desk accidentally with his knee and lets out a $15 curse word at the top of his lungs and storms out of the room. I'd been a teacher for 10 minutes. Fast forward, things got more smooth. We did okay. I ended up having him for a couple of classes during his high school career. Fast forward a few years, my car was in the parking lot. He had graduated. My car was in the parking lot. This must have been my last year at Tama. And it had been hit. Someone, a teenage driver had misjudged the turn, and I came out and my truck had been hit in the parking lot. And so I called the police just to make sure that I reported it, and here comes the police officer, gets out of his car. It's him. It's the young man that in the first 5 minutes, and he had graduated. I had kind of lost track of him. I had no idea that he went into law enforcement. He had just started on the Tama police force. And I immediately thought back to that very first time that I met him and the situation that transpired. And it's just been such a good reminder that kids are not little adults. They are not fully formed. We don't know where they're going to go, and we can't write them off. Because this kid who was cussing at me within 5 minutes of meeting me was now the one helping me as a professional police officer. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. And it taught me to never write anybody off.
Yeah, it really comes full circle there when you.
Yeah, totally. So proud of him.
When that came up, that's a cool story. And those local people here, you might be able to put two and two together and figure out.
They might. I don't know. I don't know if he's still there or what's going on, but that was really cool.
Oh, that's a cool story. Well, hey man, thank you so much. It was perfect timing. Some awesome answers. Is there anything we did not get to that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think anybody that's considering going into administration, I just encourage you. It's such a rewarding. It's a rewarding career. The question is, can I do it? You're going to think no, and there's going to be times where you think you can't, but I think I'm proof that you can. I'm not the prototypical high school principal. I'm actually quite introverted. I don't tick a lot of the boxes that you would expect, but here I am 15 years later, and I've done at least well enough not to get fired by the schools that I've been a part of, and have found it rewarding. And one thing I would say to those aspiring leaders: find mentors. And I think I speak for a lot of principals. One of my absolute favorite things to do is work with aspiring principals. If I ever went out of public school administration, that's what I'd want to go into. I'd want to work full time with aspiring principals. A lot of times they don't want to, they know that we're busy, and so they don't want to be a bother. But it is so rewarding, and I think I speak for a lot of principals saying, go and ask them, and they want to help.
Yeah. So that I completely agree. It's fun once you. I'm probably mid-career at this point, but now I'm like, okay, I think I've got enough where I would love to start mentoring more, sharing some of what I've learned and trying to help people avoid those mistakes, we can, even last year, I know I've made some mistakes that I wish I'm like, oh, I should have done that differently. So, well, thanks, Brian, so much for your time. This was episode 20. So I'm, we're getting up there.
Yeah.
And Brian, high school principal at Okoboji in Okoboji, Iowa, up in Northwest Iowa. And for those of you listening, I always remind you, if a lot of listeners on Apple Podcasts, if you could just Drew, that, those 5-star ratings help us out quite a bit. So if you're listening at home and you enjoyed what you listened to today, and I don't know how you could not have, because Brian shared some wonderful advice, just drop that 5-star rating to kind of get more people noticing the podcast. Also, if you're on Spotify, it's real quick just to subscribe, and that way you don't miss an episode. So appreciate everybody listening. And Brian, thank you. You've got a busy day there. You've got about seven kids running around the house today, 3 pets, and the wife is gone. So good luck.
Yeah, well, we have the same number at the end of the day.
Yeah. So good luck and thank you. And you have good luck with the starting up the school year there. Okay.
Thank you, Jared. You too.
Okay. Thank you.